You ready to podcast, Martin?
I wasn't born ready. I was about to lie to you. I am ready though.
I
currently.
was born ready.
Yeah?
Yeah.
See, I didn't know what podcasts were when I was born.
The doctor said, "How does
even
this
know.
baby have the voice of Howard Stern? I don't understand it."
I think they'll have some sort of internet-based radio show.
I will be seeking out a church. This is unnatural.
I don't know what that means.
You know what, Martin? So when we started the video version of this podcast, we made a commitment that the audio people would not miss out on anything, which is why we don't put in any graphics, we don't show B-roll, we don't have a Jamie to pull up any clips. But the audio audience, they're missing out today.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh.
Seriously.
I see.
YouTube.
I see.
Look at this mug.
Oh no,
I feel
the
like
lighting.
The way I lit it is if I put it close enough to the camera.
Yeah, it's
you
like
can't
it's
see it,
invisible.
But
Just enhance.
Look at the beauty. Look at the
Zoom
beauty.
in your browser.
I got this mug for Christmas. It's wonderful.
It's a pretty good mug.
Anna is the best fiance in the world. I don't think I've actually publicly stated that we are engaged now.
Uh-oh.
So, boom, there it is. And I'm editing this episode, so she probably won't even know that I said it on here. But I'm saying it because, yeah, we're going to get married.
It's pretty dope.
It's going to be great. Life is transitioning to a new stage.
I mean, it always is, but this time it feels more obvious.
It does. Yeah, it does feel a lot more obvious.
Yeah.
But you know what doesn't change? My ability to do smooth segues. Because guess what we're talking about today?
What?
Transitioning and
Wow.
pivoting
Look at
into
that.
new phases of life and work.
It's like getting engaged to a new job.
Yeah.
You're making a commitment.
Perhaps I'll talk more about that at a different time. But you know what? It's if anyone's business, it's mine and Anna's business mostly.
That's
So
true.
I'll just say we're engaged, so I can be like, she's my fiance and not have to make a big deal out of it. Boom. You've been saying that for over a year?
This is true because everything was very obnoxious last year. Not a good year.
Yeah.
Not a good year for that.
Oh, I think this is a better year.
And
Just
also,
in general.
I mean, for us, we also just don't really care about weddings that much. It's like the point was the commitment, and the commitment is now kind of already there. So we'll get to it. It's just not. It's not when you've already been living with somebody for years. You obviously know it doesn't. It's not quite as hasty.
Yeah, it's
still
This would be-
good, but it's not the same as if it would have been done like years ago.
This would be an interesting discussion to have because I feel like you and I have the same view on this where and I've had people who I've talked to in my family disagree, but for me, the asking was the most important thing. And then the wedding ceremony is still important, but it is of secondary importance
Oh yeah.
because me asking and her saying yes was like we were together alone making the commitment to each other, and that is like it's a bond between two people, whereas the wedding ceremony is really about doing it in front of witnesses.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, I feel like the average day after that is more. I'm more concerned with the marriage than the wedding, but
It's very true.
you know, not that weddings can't be cool,
Except for if I don't have like
but
flame-eating
we've been busy.
hula hoop dancers that burst out of the wedding cake then cost $20,000 every 10 minutes, then the wedding is off.
That's gonna be cool. The inside of the cake will be caramelized
It will.
by the flaming.
Have you ever had
hoops.
it caramelized and sweat-flavored inside of wedding cake?
The sweat evaporates from the fire.
Oh, that's true.
It leaves behind a salty brine that goes.
This is gross.
This is a cooking show. No,
is-
it's not.
this is
Let's talk
gross.
about careers.
Yeah, let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next topic.
Bad cake.
All right. To give everyone a preview for this episode, we're going to talk about some considerations, a lot of these from our own experience, about transitioning from one type of career to another or moving within your same career field, but making a change. Everyone goes through, I think, at least the desire to make a change at some point, whether it's a major change, like a college major change, or maybe a major change, or, shifting careers once you've already started working. Or just like, getting into a different subfield of your same field. I want to talk about how to do this successfully. I want to talk about some of the pitfalls. And I think it would be quite thematic and also would be very good to inform the audience at the beginning of an episode. I think it would be good to talk about our upcoming shift/pivot with regards to this podcast.
Oh yeah, there's a real pivot. I was just thinking. So to do this episode, we're gonna quit everything, right? We're shutting down the business to change careers.
Yeah, I'm starting a yoga studio.
But no, you're
I'm
right.
Very, very inflexible, but
yeah,
it's gonna be like elementary school when like the substitute teacher just wheels the TV card in and has Bill Nye teach you. It's gonna be like that.
It's gonna be a great idea.
You will pay me $250 a month for me to play Yoga with Adrian videos on a CRT TV in front of you.
Someone to do it.
And I will sit there eating pizza like my high school wrestling coach did while we were dying.
Way to be a caricature. But yeah, there's an actual pivot. I forgot.
Yes.
I forgot there was a legitimate example to use.
Yeah, so we mentioned this at the tail end of our 2019 year in review episode.
Yeah.
But for the audience who hasn't heard this, at episode 300, we are going to end the College Info Geek podcast. Now, before you freak out,
R.I.P.
Before you freak out, we're still going to keep podcasting.
I like podcasting.
You and I have discussed it.
It's fun.
Here is my thoughts on like why we should end this podcast. I think people, like for the most part, the core audience, they want to hang out with us. They might not necessarily care about what we're talking about. And if you look back at the last probably 100 episodes, I can think of 2 that were student specific.
We have been not doing a lot of those in the
Yeah.
latest season of College Info Geek podcast content because we're just drifting further away.
Mm-hmm.
In a few days, I'm going to hit the very last year of my 20s. How much can I connect with?
That's the thing, right? So there comes a point where you have kept doing something because that's the thing you do, and you need to continually justify why you're doing it. And I feel like doing it under this name is no longer justifiable. I mean, we could. I don't think
just
anything
misleading,
bad would come from it, but like it could be under a much more descriptive moniker, or a non-descriptive moniker, which would be better, I think. Because we're at 287 right now.
Yeah,
I can think of, I believe the 14 ways to spend your time in college or something like that. We did that maybe within the last 100, and then I know like 212 was test tips like for exams. Other than that, we've done episodes on just general self-development. I know from reading the YouTube comments that we have an audience that spans a wide variety of ages and life stages. I do want to give a shout out to our listener Clay, who I believe comments on every single episode in the YouTube comments.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. What up?
Clay, I believe, is 70 years old. So, which I think, we had a discussion in the comments.
That's dedication.
Recently where he kind of mentioned that he still thinks of himself as a student, and I do too.
That's good.
I'm a student of life, and I honestly believe I've learned more that I use in my work within the last couple of years than I ever learned in college or formal education.
Yeah.
Like, it's been like drinking from a fire hose ever since I hired Tony, because we both just kind of feed off of each other's desire to learn and grow, and in my case, probably acquire way too much camera gear and then learn how to use that. But hey, this set is so much better than it used to be, I think, because we've learned more about lighting. We've learned more about cameras and focusing and all kinds of cool stuff. Anyway, long story short, we're going to keep podcasting. We don't know what the name of the podcast is yet, but I'm thinking it's going to be something where we have more flexibility to just kind of chat.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is, sometimes we're going to want to review a book. But if we say, hey, we're doing a book review podcast, now you and I are obligated to read the same book once a month or once every 2 weeks or something like that. And I don't know about you, but I typically don't read a book in a month, and I would not want to feel obligated to have the one book a month I do usually read be the same one that you want to read.
Yeah, that would limit both of our choices.
And
then like if we're busy for a month and now the book is a chore, rather than just, hey, I read this really cool book, let's talk about it. That's more organic to review a book that way, I think, than to try to scramble when we're busy to find a quick one.
Mm-hmm. But I also want to talk about, like philosophy stuff. I would also love to have the occasional episode where, like, hey, we both saw a movie that we thought was cool. Let's talk about that. So the sort of model that I'm thinking, and we haven't super hashed this out yet, but the sort of model that I'm thinking about using as a springboard is a podcast called Cortex, which I've been listening to for many, many years. It's CGP Grey and Mike Hurley. And that podcast, interestingly enough, it started out as a sort of interview, like Mike interviewing Gray about his productivity systems. And it was meant to be a 10-episode limited run podcast. But I think they're in the 80s or 90s now because they enjoyed it and they kept going. And it's kind of like what I just described. Sometimes they will talk about, like if WWDC is going on, they're going to talk about the new Apple tech that came out. I don't think you care too much about tech, so we might not do that. But they'll do that, or they'll talk about a book sometimes, or they'll talk about just something random that's interesting to them. And I like that kind of a format. The other reason that I think this is necessary for you and me both is that we're starting to do bigger projects that just take more time.
Yeah.
The last video that we were working on, we drove up to the mountains to film over 2 days. And Tony and I are still not done filming that.
You going to go back up?
No, we're not going to go back up. But we have stuff here to film.
Ah, I gotcha.
There's like the thematic on-location mountain part of it, and then there's B-roll about the subject matter that we have to film here. And we're filming most of our footage in RAW now, which has a whole transcoding process. Like, we've tried to adopt some of the workflow methodologies of bigger productions because we want to up our game on YouTube. And unfortunately, you can't do that while maintaining the same amount of rigor in the script writing process, while retaining a somewhat regular publishing schedule, and also do a well-researched podcast once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, you could, but you would have no work-life balance. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately too. Like, Anna really wants me to not be working at nights and, spending 10 or 12-hour days working on the business because, at what point does that stop? And I was watching a stream that Linus Sebastian did the other day because the Linus Tech Tips channel just recently passed 10 million subscribers. And their 10 million subscriber special was him getting on stream under the title, "I've been thinking of retiring." And he's just talking about like how he's, had all these kind of like issues he's been working through, like kind of dealing with the fact that sometimes it seems pointless. But one thing that really struck me is he was talking about how he's had these discussions with his wife where, she would say like, when are you going to scale back to a somewhat normal working schedule and allow yourself time to spend with me and to spend with your kids? And he was talking about how like he would always sort of move the goalposts. I'll cut back when we have our first kid. I'll cut back when our first kid is old enough to understand that dad needs to be around. I'll cut back when our first kid is old enough that they need homework help, things like that. And he was saying like eventually I realized it's kind of a Walter White situation where at first he's doing it because he needs to support his family, but eventually he realizes that he's doing it because he just likes it, and it's almost like an addiction. And when you get to that point, you have to make a conscious decision to limit yourself. And I know that I'm the same way. I don't know if you're quite the same way because you don't own the business, but I know that you have a lot of like art projects and stuff that can also.
I certainly don't balance my life very well.
Yeah.
That is very much the same.
Yep. So it comes to a point where it's like, I know there's going to be a certain subset of the audience that would love for us to podcast twice a week while also putting out daily videos. And you have to answer a question at some point. You have to look yourself in the mirror and say, who do I want to disappoint? Do I want to disappoint some people on the internet, or do I want to disappoint the most important person in my life? Because there is no in-between where you're just never going to disappoint anybody.
The real in-between is just kind of disappointing everyone, which is, that's worse because then you're disappointing and everybody's like, just make a decision. Mm-hmm. You're waffling and disappointing.
Yeah. So we've talked in the past about the importance of building a solid center of your identity and what you want, and that comes into play here because you do need to take what other people say into consideration, but there's also like your own personal values that you have to query when determining your course of action. And for me, you know, that is number one, dedicating more time to the person who I love and who I'm eventually going to marry. But also spending more of my work time on the projects that I think are going to be more impactful and that I think I'm going to be more satisfied and fulfilled doing.
Yeah.
You know, and if I feel like I have to come up with a PowerPoint slide about test taking tips every week while I'm 30 years old, like that's
there's only so much that we haven't already said.
Yeah.
About those things. Yeah.
So we're going to pivot. We're going to do a new podcast. We may take a small break after this one ends, and we're going to go to 300. So you guys got us until like June.
Yeah, there are still quite a few because we're not doing weekly at this point. There's still quite a bit of time.
So it'll be bi-weekly or twice a month. I don't know if it's strictly
something
bi-weekly.
to that effect.
Twice a month until 300, which I believe is in June. And then we'll most likely take a small break because I believe I'll be going to VidCon in June. Okay. And there may be, well, it's also summer, so I may try to get another vacation in around the summertime. Then we'll come back. And it may be once a month, it may be bi-weekly, we'll see. There are workflow considerations and there are content considerations. If it is a question of, we can build the set somehow that I don't have to set it up every time, which we do now because this is also our film set.
Yeah.
If we could get it somewhere else where it's just like we sit down, and if the content is such that sometimes we do like a really prepped episode on a book or something, but then sometimes we're like, hey, how's that Star Wars movie? Then maybe we could do it every 2 weeks. Depends.
Yeah.
But I want to put more time into videos. I want to put more time into music. And there's just necessary sacrifices. There are also considerations for moving into those new things as well. So I guess with that, let's start talking about the general process of pivoting to something you want to do that you're not currently doing and how to do it successfully. Because I think we've had several moves throughout our careers. And the first one actually, for both of us, was moving away from our declared majors to doing this. Well, not this, to doing really blogging and I guess like web development for you.
Yeah, because that wasn't explicitly what I was.
But you were at first a network tech. That was your associate's degree.
I got my associate's degree in network administration, desktop support certification at the same time. Basically just fixing computers and networks and, being that hacker in the basement with the matrix screen.
Mm-hmm. But I always wanted to be.
Which is like, I've had my screen look like that, and it's cool looking, but I did not continue doing it forever, clearly, as I moved in toward web development and the blogging, the language stuff, and then this, which has moved me leagues away from everything I was technically trained to do.
Now you're like the closest analogy from like the past century is you're like a radio host.
Yeah, like that. That's not what I majored in.
Yeah, kind of a crazy transition. And I started the exact same way as you did. I wanted to be the dude in the basement with all the matrix monitors running the networks. And we had similar pivot paths. And that's a trademarked phrase now.
It's a pivot
You got to pay me like a nickel every time you say it.
Yeah.
Because I also went from networking, computer infrastructure to web development. But then that's where I think we kind of diverged for a while. And now we've sort of like started moving back in to doing some of the same things. Because we podcast together. Now you've been in a video before. You were out on location filming with us a little bit. I've been like,
I've helped film before, so
yeah. I've been toying with the idea of like asking if you want to get more into that.
Oh, I'm totally down. I'm just bad. My sleep schedule needs fixed.
You do need.
That's the only reason that the first day didn't work out with the mountain, because I woke up and immediately passed back out.
Did you know I'm writing a video about how to get to bed on time? Like actually for real? Holy crap! I may put that in the title.
The problem is basically that I messed it up real bad by staying up till 4 or something one night, and then since that point I've not recovered. I'm getting better. I can wake up at like 5:30 now. Okay. But it's very difficult still. So I got to keep going. I'm getting there.
just gotta get to bed at the right time. That's the big thing for me. Like, I can force myself to get up at a certain time, but getting to bed on time, that's the harder thing.
I mean, I only just got smart enough to drink enough water in Colorado.
You gotta stay hydrated, especially if you go up to the mountains.
I feel like
drier up there.
And I feel like the problem that's kept me from this stuff is the same problem, actually, that would apply to a lot of people trying to switch careers, which is you're probably going to have to work toward that, outside of your job, which you need to pay the bills. But I'm just constantly, like, scrambling to get the job done, my projects, like, dishes and just household stuff. There are things in the house that I meant to fix, like, months ago, and they just stay at the bottom of the list.
Oh, dude, house improvement
They just
projects,
stay there.
They do just kind of stay there all the time. There's always something more urgent or more higher priority, honestly.
And there's got to be a way to balance that better, because otherwise I can't make progress toward the goals of just getting to bed on time the same way that I can't progress toward goals, or somebody wouldn't be able to progress. And I mean, imagine if either one of us had kids. Then imagine trying to do all this stuff on the side too. That's a real thing. It's just, how does one even get time to work on any of these goals?
Yeah. That's a super common thing in my comments. Like, there will always be somebody who's like, all these productivity tips go out the window once you have kids. To which I say, I'm not a father, so maybe you know something I don't. But I have heard from fathers that kids put you on a schedule. Actually, Paul Graham has an essay on this, on having kids, I believe it's called. And he talks about how he was afraid of having kids, and he thought he was going to become uncool because all parents are uncool. And now that he has kids, he's got some observations on it. But one of them was, kids put you on a schedule, but you can use that to your advantage. And yes, you are going to have to temper your ambition a little bit, because when you have kids, there is less time you have in the day, and there is going to be a necessary reduction in the amount of work you can get done. But I love this this one sentence in the article, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was something along the lines of, if your ambition was so weak that kids destroyed it, like, was it worth having in the first place? There's going to be a necessary reduction in the amount of time you have to work on it, but I've often found that the amount of time I have to work on something scales inversely with the amount of focus I have on it.
Like if you have 20 minutes to give something, you're gonna be really focused on it, as opposed to And when you're like, I'm gonna take today I'm gonna do this absurdly ambitious thing because yesterday I did this much in 20 minutes. Therefore, mathematically, with 8 hours. Here's what I can do.
With 8 hours, I will find something else to do.
But what's actually going to happen is with 8 hours, you're going to like get distracted, or you're going to get too ambitious and scare yourself. With 20 minutes, you probably get. I've been finding 40 minutes is about my best number for automatic. If I do this, I'm going to hit the flow state. I'm going to get good stuff done, and I'm going to maybe push past it a little bit because I'll be motivated. Yeah. And I'll leave feeling good. If I push that up too hard, I will get tired of it, or I will never start because I'm like intimidated by the schedule. And if it's too far below that, like 10 minutes, then I'm going to be like, it's going to take me like 8 months to read this book. What's even the point of going at this rate?
There's an analogy that I like to think of with regards to how much time you should build into a session. It's like, picture a miner, like a pickaxe miner, like a gold miner, right?
Well, it's also going to be a kid now. It's
now
a little kid working the mines.
This is dark.
With a pickaxe.
It could be a kid, could be a full-grown burly man.
That kid's an entrepreneur.
Either way, when you start digging, like, say the first 10 feet of soil, there's not going to be anything in that. Nothing of value. You simply have to excavate that dirt
just
or
the top layer.
Or rock. The gemstones are deep within the mines. So the first 10 minutes, or the first, the first introductory stage of mining is just the warm-up. It's just clearing out the necessary detritus to get yourself to the position where you can start actually harvesting something of value. And I think about this with literally anything I'm doing. Like when I go for a run, I've got right now I think it's a 6-minute, 30-second first mile pace. But then my second mile feels horrible. And I'm wheezing, I'm out of breath. I feel like I want to quit. I'm just like, I want to walk right now. And then around Once I hit the 2-mile mark, I've noticed, at least right now, I hit a second wind where my body's like finally warmed up, and I don't know what it is, but I feel maybe it's that runner's high that people talk about. Where I'm like, I can keep moving and it doesn't feel like I'm going to fall over and die of a heart attack right now. Whereas it did during mile 2.
So if you stop during mile 2, you're going to have a terrible.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I stopped, that'd be
association.
fine. But
well, I mean,
yeah.
if you stop when you feel terrible, you're only going to be
Yes.
like, it only feels terrible.
But I've learned, like, I can just basically sprint the first mile, and then the second mile is going to suck, and maybe the second mile will suck less as my cardio gets better. But once I get past that, like, I kind of hit that second wind, and then I'm in like the working territory. And right now, like my only limitation with distance is my knee issue that I've had since I was 16 years old. So I can run probably about 5 miles before it's really painful. So I don't think a marathon is in the cards for me, but I can go out and do a 5-mile run, and mile 2 sucks. But after that, I'm working. Same with writing. The first 10 minutes of writing is useless. I'm just sitting there like, what do I even write? Like,
That's just like
I hate this.
You're not focused. Your mind's resisting.
Exactly.
Like, stop making me do my homework, Dad.
It's almost like you are cat dog, right?
Yeah.
Like stick with me.
Well,
here.
I've
Like,
always thought that.
I've always thought that I was.
I've always
cat dog
thought I
as
was
well,
cat
right?
dog.
And like you're going down one path, but like you're the cat, right? And then the dog is like trying to claw out, and this guy's like, he's got his like paw hooked in the doorway.
Yeah. I'm glad you understood I was the cat. Also, that's very accurate.
We're both cat people.
They're great.
But eventually, like, the cat
goes you
claws
back.
its way into the mines, and now you're there. Okay.
Then the resistance isn't as strong because once you're already there, it's like, well, fine.
Exactly.
We're already here. It would be more effort to leave.
Yeah. So when you're committing yourself to a certain amount of practice per day, I think it's got to be at least 30 minutes. And that includes working out too. You know, like right now, I just did a 5K in 25 minutes. So I'm like, cool. If I'm going for a run, it needs to be about 25 minutes at least.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to stop in that second mile before I hit the second wind, and it's going to suck. And I'm really not going to make that much progress.
So
same with writing, like Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes to start writing, and then I will not take the first break. The Pomodoro technique with the 25 minutes is just to convince my brain that this isn't too bad. It's 25 minutes, just do it. And usually around like 15, 20 minutes, I'm starting like, oh, hey, ideas are flowing. I'm going to skip that first break. I'm probably going to work for 50 minutes or an hour.
Yeah. So basically, it's sounding like if one really doesn't have time, if they could at least set aside 25, 30 minutes, that's at least enough to make progress towards stuff.
Yep.
It'll be slow progress if you've got a lot of other stuff going on, and that's understandable. No one can really get in the way of that.
Yeah.
It's you can't fix that.
So here's how this ties into pivoting to getting on your pivot path. TM. Registered
TM.
trademark.
TM.
Copyright.
Sending that in
2020.
later today.
Yeah. Patent number 9,206,411. In Cal Newport's book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, he talks about how people often want to switch careers. And I think one of the examples was this woman who, I don't remember what she was doing. It was some like financy thing. She wanted to be a yoga teacher and like open a yoga studio, which is so different than what you're currently doing. And he talks about this concept of what's called career capital. If you want to move to a different career area, you need career capital to do it successfully. And that would include skills in the new area. That would include building a reputation in the new area. That would include having time and having money if you're going to start a business.
Yeah.
If you're an accountant, nobody knows that you teach yoga. You don't have any kind of yoga teaching certification. I don't know if those exist. You know, maybe all those yoga teachers out there just like looked on YouTube.
Yeah,
Downward dog is just something that like some YouTuber made up, actually. I don't know. There's probably some kind of certification out there. If you don't have enough money to open a studio and keep it running for 6 months, you know, there's a high likelihood of failure. Nobody knows that you're a yoga teacher. So you have to start building the skills, the notoriety. You have to start saving money for the transition, all these things. And that takes time, and you have to do it intelligently. So the first thing is building the skills to do it. And most people have a lot of their time already blocked off with their current thing, whether it be your major in college or 8 hours a day rotting in your cubicle listening to the last episode of the College Info Geek podcast.
Yeah.
Which is a good cubicle rotting episode. But, and that's how I felt when I was doing my internship. It's like every day during the work week, I'm here for 8 hours or 10 hours when I switch to the 4-10 schedule. And I got to do this cubicle work. I got to manage these network firewalls. But I don't want to be doing this anymore. I want to write. I want to blog. You have to carve out time during your free time, and you have to honestly make a sacrifice in your work-life balance if you want to start making a pivot, a transition. Because most people, they get into a career that provides you with your resources for living, and then you use those resources to have some semblance of free time in a life, or to have kids, or to do something, right? Well, if you want to transition, you're probably not going to be able to carve time out of your currently obligated work time. So you have to find time to do it in your free time.
And the ultimate goal is that eventually you would switch and you get that free time back.
And it's probably going to have to be significant. Like we said, you can't find a diamond in like the initial 5 feet of the mine. So if you're like, and let's take a friend of ours as an example. If you're working in IT and you want to be an author, you got to come home every night and you need to write for at least an hour. At least. Or it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it might take years to both build up the skill to write at a professional level, but to also finish something that's worthy of being published.
That's the thing that I thought about a lot back when I was first getting into my job after college, just because even if I do well at any of these goals, they will probably take years. College Info Geek took years before you could stop doing other things.
This is our 10th year of business.
Yeah, that's crazy. And the thing is,
we're currently in the 9th year.
Oh, okay, we're gonna hit
June
10 soon
will be
now.
10.
Okay,
Yes.
that's ridiculous. But like, if it's going to take years, even if I'm doing well, then I cannot afford to just say I can only do this once every 2 weeks, because then it's gonna take. Well, probably never, but if I just do some math and pretend it would work out that way, 10 years now? I don't have 10 years to do this once every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. I want it sometime sooner than that.
Yeah.
So then, if I'm going to have a full-time job, probably forever, maybe I'll retire someday, but I don't imagine that. That's not useful to me at the moment other than for saving.
Yeah.
So if I just assume I'm going to be busy for at least 40 hours every week forever, and I cannot currently find time outside of the 40 hours to make progress on something, then that's never.
Yeah.
I'll never have the time.
Mm-hmm. And the quicker you want it to happen, the more of your free time you're going to need to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And of course, there are some things you can do to make that free time worth more, like learning how to work more efficiently, things like that.
Yeah, that's where all the productivity hacks come into play.
But at a certain level, you kind of maxed out your productivity, and it's like, cool, you want to do this quicker? You need to invest more time. Just like, hey, you want to buy a house quicker? Okay, you need to be setting aside more of your paycheck into your down payment fund, and you need to be buying less Heine.
Yep.
Or whatever you buy with your money that isn't saving for a house. I'm actually partial to Corona. Because it's cheap.
That's fair. Well, there you go. That's how you buy a house.
That's how you buy a house. You buy Corona. You can't be buying like my gang, 3 Philosophers Craft, like $12 for 4 bottles.
Get out of here, hipster.
You're never
Do you
gonna
want
get
a house?
If you ever, even once, eat avocado toast, you will not purchase a home. I read that on MSNBC Money blog.
Yeah, watch out.
Millennials, they're never going to buy a home because they're eating avocado toast. You know how much that costs?
Yep.
So much
It's
money.
definitely the enemy.
Yeah. This week's episode of our show is brought to you by our friends over at Brilliant, which is a fantastic platform for anybody who wants to improve their mastery in the areas of math, science, and computer science. So if you are interested in STEM fields, Brilliant is going to be an excellent resource to check out. And the reason for that is that Brilliant is a beautiful complement to traditional educational material like textbooks and videos where you kind of sit there and passively learn. And this is because Brilliant is built upon a foundation of active learning and problem solving. Every single one of their courses guides you through storytelling problems, code writing challenges, all kinds of stuff that gets you really kind of actively getting your hands dirty and working and being really invested in the process as you learn. The great thing about this is when you learn actively, you retain the information a lot more quickly and a lot more effectively, and you also stay more interested as you're doing it. Now, when you get into Brilliant, you're going to find an in-depth library of more than 60 different courses. They have an entire math suite ranging from the basics of number theory and algebra to calculus and math for trading and finance, probability, statistics, all kinds of stuff. Their math offering is huge. They also have tons of science courses, a gravitational physics course, a classical mechanics course, one on waves and light, and computer science courses. They have a Python programming course, and they also have a lot of very fundamental computer science. And this is really important if you want to be a programmer who can kind of outcompete the people who just learned the syntax of programming languages. When you learn how algorithms actually work, for example, what kind of sort is the fastest sort? Like a bubble sort, or that's the only sort that I could think of right now because I'm not a computer scientist.
Well, then of your list, that's the one.
Insertion sort, that's another one, right? I think insertion sort is generally more efficient than bubble sort. And you're going to learn about things like the N notation for sort efficiency, things like that. These are very important concepts for understanding why you would write a program in a certain way. And if you as a programmer can write a faster, more efficient, more secure program than the next guy, you're going to get the job. So Brilliant's library has all those courses, but they also have a feature called Daily Challenges, where every day you get a new challenge in a different area that can, number one, help you to make problem solving and learning a daily habit, which helps you become a better problem solver overall, but also could expose you to a new subject area that you hadn't considered before. And when you learn in a wide variety of areas, you gain this vast library of knowledge, which you can pull from. You can pull from all sorts of different areas, combine what you know, and either creatively solve problems that other people can't solve, or be innovative, create things that people haven't seen before. So if you want to get started, you can start for free today by going over to brilliant.org/collegeinfogeek and signing up. And with their free plan, you get access to those daily challenges every single day. And with their premium plan, you get access to that full library of in-depth courses, plus the entire archive of every daily challenge that has come out in the past. And if you're one of the first 200 people to go to brilliant.org/collegeinfogeek and sign up, you're going to get 20% off that annual premium subscription. So big thanks to Brilliant, as always, for sponsoring this episode and being a huge supporter of College Info Geek and all the work that we do here. And also, another thanks goes out to our second sponsor this week, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is a fantastic learning library for anybody who wants to boost their creative abilities, their skills, and their job prospects. So if you want to learn video editing, if you want to learn graphic design, if you want to learn illustration, if you want to learn music production, the business skills, marketing, analytics, all that kind of stuff, Skillshare is a fantastic resource. And every time I do a Skillshare ad, I have a course to plug, but in January, I have to plug my own course. I know it's a little bit selfish, it's fine, but I have a brand new course that came out on January 1st, all about how to build strong habits. So if you're the kind of person who either has trouble sticking to habits over the long term, or just doesn't really know what kind of habits you want to build, I think you're going to get a lot out of this course. It goes through the process of determining your goals, narrowing them down, and figuring out which ones are truly important to focus on right now if you have a bunch, or figuring out what goals you should focus on if you're kind of listless right now and don't know what to do. And then from there, it goes into the process of breaking your goals down into actionable sub-steps that you can turn into habits and that allow you to make concrete practice every single day. And we also talk about how to actually stick to those habits. We talk about some apps and some methods that you can use to augment your own self-discipline and to help it grow and strengthen over time. Additionally, I have another course on Skillshare all about productivity systems. So if you want to figure out how to make your to-do list, your note-taking system, your calendar, all these different tools that we use, if you want to learn how to make them work harmoniously, that course is available as well. And the best part is that, number one, Skillshare is already a very affordable platform. Their plans start at less than $10 a month. But if you were one of the first 500 people to go over to Skillshare.com/geek and sign up, you're going to get a 2-month free trial with unlimited access to their entire library of thousands of different classes. So in addition to being able to take, any graphic design course you want, any any video editing class that you want. You'll also be able to take both of my classes as long as you take them both within that first 2 months. You can do that for free. And again, once that trial's up, Skillshare is an incredibly affordable platform. So once again, Skillshare.com/geek. If you're one of the first 500 people to use that link and sign up, you're going to get a 2-month free trial. Big thanks, as always, to Skillshare once again for sponsoring this podcast and being a huge supporter of my show and also partnering with me to build these courses and make them generally excellent. So check it out, and let's get back into the episode. All right, so I want to talk about some transitions that I've made, some of the things that I have done, and there are some other points I kind of want to hit while telling these stories, because there is I think the most obvious aspect of it where, yeah, you got to put in time during your free time.
Yeah.
But there's some other things, like how do you start to build relationships in this new area?
Yeah, you need to do the networking
and
ahead of time.
This is something you're thinking about, and you've mentioned it, like, I want to start building some relationships in the indie game dev world, but I'm not in that world right now. So how do I do that without just like looking like a fan?
And keep in mind the whole time, anytime I say networking, I mean making friends with people, because shallow networking will probably be seen through by especially if you're trying to get into an earnest industry, like I'm interested in cool indie game stuff. I think the people in that industry probably like what they're doing and would notice if I was just a shallow, give me a job kind of person. Maybe certain jobs wouldn't care if you were shallowly networking, but
there are probably
harder
industries where like it's shallow networking.
That would be just fine,
of the day.
But
I don't like it.
No, I think that it's harder and more rewarding to be slowly making real connections in these places. But you got to do that way ahead of time. You can't just quit your career and then be like, okay, I'm going to go become best friends with this person in this new industry today, or else I'm going to have to call my landlord.
Well, I think it's also useful to analyze your motivations and ask yourself, like, what truly makes me happy right now? Because, we can think about a pivot, right? So let's just take one that I want to do. I want to get more into music. And you might think of the first thing that comes to your mind is like my motivation for doing that. I want to be a freaking rock star, man. I want to be up on stage. There's like haze all around me. There's like thousands of screaming fans. But when I really think about like my day-to-day experience and what makes it happier, it's not going to be that. That might be a fun like highlight, but what I really enjoy is making music, which I currently can do without being a full-time rock star, but also being friends with people who are into that kind of stuff. Like, I really enjoy that. So I never want to approach networking purely from a professional standpoint, because that is incongruent with my desire to build true friendships with people who also like playing music.
Yeah.
I would rather go at it from the, hey, let's be friends, and also, what can we do to help each other out professionally? Like I recently started a little Slack group for a few YouTubers who are doing like a similar stuff to me. And there's going to be professional reasons why that will be beneficial, but the best part of it is that we just kind of like talk together, and just like make jokes, and we are all kind of into the same stuff, so the conversations are great. And that's my motivation. It's always been my motivation. Like, how do I become friends with these people who are doing the kind of stuff I want to do? Because they're awesome. I look up to them, and I would like to be friends with them. Anyway, so I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about how do you start branding yourself in this new area without making an incredibly jarring transition that alienates the people who already know you as one thing and completely falls on its face for the new thing. Because tomorrow I have all the ability in the world to change my Instagram, my Twitter, my YouTube to total music.
Yeah.
It would be easy. Like, get a picture of me with a guitar, throw that as my profile picture. All my bios now say like professional rock star, turn it up to 11, man. And I delete all my videos.
Your username. It's now unrecognizable. It's like a band name.
So everybody who follows me for productivity, they're going to be like, what the heck? Like, number one, I liked what you were doing, and now I'm kind of like pissed that you're not doing it anymore. And then, people who I would want to attract in the music world, they're like, who the heck are you? You look like a poser.
Yeah.
What have you done? So if you just try to make this gigantic branding change overnight, it's going to fall flat on its face in more ways than one. So how do you start transitioning there? And let me just talk about music. So this is the one where I'm like currently doing some things, trying some things out. I'm actually writing a talk about this, which the talk itself is part of the strategy.
Real meta.
I'm writing a talk about how to transition to a new industry from your current one, and I'm going to use this as an example, which will let some people know that I'm starting to move into this new industry while also giving a talk about productivity and self-development.
It's right
And
there.
I've always
it's right
thought
in that
about
Venn
like
diagram.
the 2 birds with 1 stone thing, and it's like 2 gummy birds because I don't want to go out and shoot birds.
You got to
throw rocks at birds.
feed 2 birds with 1
yes,
scone.
with 1 stone.
No, scone. Make it a scone.
2 birds
These
with
are
1 scone.
like British birds.
Oh,
they're hungry for scones.
I didn't see pigeons eating
That's
scones.
British, right? I don't care. Moving on.
I don't know.
It's good.
I always assume most baked
The birds
goods
like
come from
scones.
France.
The birds like scones. That's all we need to know right now.
The birds do like scones. They're very good.
But yeah, that's actually a really good right in the middle of that Venn diagram.
So here's something I noticed a long time ago. Unless you are I keep using a when I should use an. Unless you are an A-list celebrity, unless you are Chris Hemsworth or Scarlett Johansson or movie star or Rihanna, Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, somebody like that. Unless you're somebody at that level, if you have some level of like minor fame or influence, like I do, you have to eventually learn that that influence applies to a narrow band of things.
Yeah.
If you want to remain influential, you kind of have to stay in your lane. Like Chris Hemsworth, he can be Thor, and then he can put out a fitness app, and that's going to do well, and he could probably start like a Lego review set channel on YouTube, and that would do incredibly well, and people would be like, did you know that 1996 Star Wars Death Star was actually way better than the re-release in 2013 because the plastic injection molding was so much better. Chris Hemsworth told me that.
Wow.
And everybody knows. Chris knows Legos.
That's
his new channel. Chris knows Legos.
You should do that. That'd be cool. See, I'd watch it.
There you go, Chris.
Already
There's
on board.
an idea, right? He's an A-list. If I go tomorrow and I'm like, Lego channel, some people are going to follow it, but very few. So here's my here's my real world observation on this. If I tweet like a productivity quote, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit alone quietly in a room. Blaise Pascal. 500 likes on Twitter, 426 retweets. Everyone's like, yeah, man, you're right. Like productivity. Yeah. If I'm like, hey guys, this new Hands Like Houses song is pretty cool. 1 like. Nobody cares about my taste in music. Doesn't matter if I have 42,000 followers. Doesn't matter if my engagement is usually pretty high. My influence does not exist in the sphere of music curation.
Yeah.
Except, turns out it does. In one certain way. I'm the study, productivity, academic success YouTuber. So, for the past probably 5 or 6 years, I've been building the Ultimate Study Music playlist. And at first, it was just because I wanted to build the Ultimate Study Music playlist. And, if I'm honest with myself, that's still basically my main motivation for doing it. I'm like, I like finding new study music. I'm always listening to music while I work. I'm just not a person who works or reads or studies in silence. That's not me. But it eventually occurred to me. There's people commenting below these study music tracks on YouTube saying, hey, Thomas Frank sent me here. Anybody here from Thomas Frank? Anybody here listening to Thomas Frank's YouTube playlist? Like, I have unwittingly built up somewhat of a reputation and audience as a music curator in a very specific type of music that you can study to. I wonder if I could do something with this. So, my first 2 tracks that exist on my music channel are instrumental tracks that I designed specifically to be usable as study music, because then I was able to drop them in and start to give people a little bit of a taste of, hey, I like to make music. And this music exists in an area where I currently have some influence. It fits on my playlists. And if you know anything about the music industry, playlist placements are huge, which I've learned because I eventually ported my study music playlist from YouTube over to Spotify, started building that up, and now every single day I get at least 2 people emailing me, either record label execs, or not execs, but like record label reps or independent artists, being like, hey, can you put my track in your playlist? And 99 times out of 100, they're not even sending me study music. Like, yo, my name's Krispy Kreme, and I'm a rapper from Long Island, and I got a new track. Like, it's called Krispy Kreme Donuts and bring it back, the hip hop game. You want to put it on your study music playlist? No, you can't study to that. I mean, maybe some people can, but
yeah,
you know, I respect the hustle. You're shooting your shot. Yeah, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Michael Scott said that, but it doesn't fit. Anyway, I found myself unwittingly becoming one of those like playlist curators with some amount of influence, given the amount of unsolicited email submissions I'm getting. But I realized, like, this is how you transition. You find something where there is an intersection between the audiences, or at least between the two fields, the first one that you are currently in and the one that you're trying to transition to. So the next track I have coming out is not study music at all. It's like a post-hardcore rock song that I'm working on. So here's my thought with that. And I had this thought in the car the other day. What if I went back into the studio and did a reimagined instrumental version of that track that releases on the same day as the real one? Then I can put that one on my study music playlists where I have influence and hopefully get a few people curious enough to go over to my profile and check out the real version. Otherwise, I really got nothing. I mean, I can do the typical hustle stuff, but I can't parlay my current influence, my current skills, anything into this because it's just so different. So this is how I think strategically about pivoting to a new area. How can I use my current audience, my current skills, my current relationships in a way that can kind of organically include the new thing that I want to do without it being jarring or without it feeling forced?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing.
That's a pretty good strategy.
And I think there are other avenues that we can go through as well. Like music is a very good example for many of the productivity concepts that we talk about and teach on my channel. So we could often be like, hey, you know, how did you deliberate practice? Well, let me show you in the context of guitar. By the way, I make music. Check it out over here.
Yeah.
You know, find ways to do that. Another thing that I'm working on doing is, again, I want to build relationships with people who are musicians. And one of the things like I think people struggle with building relationships is if you come at it from a pure friend angle, people are usually too busy, especially if it's like people who are kind of well known. You know, one way that I've always said to sort of not really get around that, but deal with that is don't be afraid to talk with people who are at your own level. You know, when I go to conferences, it's always like a million people lining up to talk to the one dude who's swamped with attention. And I'm like, the person right next to you probably knows so much and they would be great to talk to. So why don't you do that? But one thing that I've been doing is building this series called How They Work, where I'll go in and interview somebody about the methods they use, the tools they use, how they get things done, their workflow, and put it on the channel. And that's actually, you know, very enticing for people. So I'm like, maybe I could do that with like a band that I really look up to. That might be a way where they'd be willing to talk to me.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe this seems, I don't know, maybe this seems like unrelatable to people who don't have a YouTube channel, but there were ways that I did this when I was much, much smaller as well. You know, I like a little blog. Actually, I remember this when College Info Geek was so tiny as to be basically inconsequential. I still reached out to Gears for Breakfast, the people who made Hat in Time, and I was able to interview them about game development. And I wrote up this whole interview for them. I mean, it wasn't a big blog at all, but I was like, hey, I have this blog for college students. A lot of students are into game development. You guys are doing an awesome game that I really want to play. I'm super excited about it. I would like to interview you about how you are making this game. You know, and they were happy to talk to me.
Yeah. And fortunately, this particular thing, the College Info Geek as a whole, very flexible.
It does turn out to be pretty
you can
flexible.
overlap it with lots of things.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another example. Well, dang it. College Info Geek is just like, it's got its fingers in all of my life areas. For moving to the blogging thing, in my internship, my internship was dealing with firewall settings. But there was like a call that went out to the intern group, and they were like, "Hey, we want to have some interns volunteer for this intern committee that will be tasked with like doing things to kind of like show what the intern experience is like." So I volunteered for that, and when we got together as a group, they were like, "Hey, what can we do to do this?" And one of the ideas was, let's do a blog series, kind of like chronicling the experience of different interns. And it just so happened that I was already doing that on College Info Geek for myself. I had a series called The Internship Experience. And I'm like, hey, I have this little tiny blog. Like, do y'all want to just do it on that? And they said yes. So I was able to actually use some of my work time to keep building College Info Geek. And also share it with some of the people at my job. And then they were sharing it. Like I had 2 other interns who were writing about their experiences, and then they were sharing the articles on my site.
That makes sense.
You know? This is pretty cool. So yeah, I'm curious about you. You've been thinking about some game development stuff.
I have been. And I've done several different things, largely through weird little overlaps. Like I started blogging at one point and then built my own website. Overlapped that, started becoming a web developer in general, then did yours. And then went to a web development job. And then when I couldn't do that because of my hands, came back to work with you more because I had already overlapped and, I'd been working with you already due to the other thing. Then we did podcasting, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm doing photography, which is like, I don't have a huge social media following or anything.
Yeah.
But photography is definitely the thing that I have the most feedback or anything for online.
So actually, your case might be more relatable then.
So
because your social media following is not gigantic.
It's not huge. It's also not related. I don't post things productivity wise.
Yeah.
Like every time. So like if I get followers from a podcast episode or something, eventually I'll see a few numbers just drop in a few days, and I'm just assuming they figured out what I actually post about, not what they thought it was going to be. So there's a little bit less of an overlap. But if I start with the fact that I've been slowly building up a following for primarily nature photography, not always, and in order to go into other things, I've been kind of trying to sort of sprinkle in bits of other things. Every once in a while, a pixel art piece. Every once in a while, some piano, the other stuff I'm doing. While at the same time knowing very well that if I posted pixel art every day for a week, it would probably be incredibly jarring.
Yeah.
So right now,
hey guys, I'm a pixel artist now.
Yeah, I got to be like photographer who's still doing that because that's what you're here for. But then every once in a while, I'm just like, hey, look, something different, and then it's exciting. But if I do it too many times in a row, it's not exciting. It's just confusing.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to make connections through that, and then I learned about the pixel art stuff through that Pixel Pete video, which we then talked about in that video of yours, and then he ended up putting a clip of us in his own video. So
that's true.
There you go.
So now you have a little bit of exposure to the
just
game development community.
A little bit at a time. And I think patience has really been the key here because I'm not trying too hard to push into any of these things at the moment. Realizing that time takes away from the photography, which is what my account is thriving on.
Yeah.
Which is, it's just like anything else. If it's your job that you're living based on, you can't exactly pull it back entirely. So I'm doing a little bit at a time. Eventually, I may, depending, make a separate account for pixel art if I start making enough that people can come to me for that specifically.
And I like the idea of sprinkling things in every once in a while, because then you don't have to think of like some uber strategic thing. You can just be like, hey, if you're interested, go check this out.
And
I tend to regularly scheduled macro photography.
I tend to get pretty good feedback when I do that occasionally. It's just that I have to keep up the main thing, and then every once in a while surprise you with something new.
Yeah.
And not make it jarring. And then slowly, people are going to be like, he also does this. So when I eventually make a pixel art account or do some sort of thing where I'm working on a cool little indie game or something, it won't be surprising. Yeah. It will be a natural extension of what people already know about me.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about College Info Geek and my slow move away from it, because that was a big thing.
You've been having to step away from that concept.
Yeah, and I remember it has gone better than I imagined that it ever would. In 2012, before I started the College Info Geek podcast, before I started my YouTube channel, just the blog, I was in New York City going to a conference called Blog World. And a friend of mine was talking to me. We're walking down the street in New York City, and he's like, hey, when are you going to move away from College Info Geek? Because you graduate college next year. And in his mind, and I agreed with this at the time, I was like, yeah, I was scared about it. In his mind, the moment I graduated from college, I would age out of the subject I had picked. And I would become just another, adult. And who's going to listen to an adult? My blog was a student talking to other students.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, I learned, especially through YouTube, that is not the case. Because all my videos were like, how to take notes, the 5 best systems, -- College Info Geek in the title. And at first, my channel, I think it was always called Thomas Frank because I've had my YouTube channel since 2006. But the banner at the top was College Info Geek, new study videos every week. And nobody ever freaked out about the fact that I wasn't a student. And I didn't intro my videos being like, hey guys, my name's Thomas Frank. I'm not a student, but here's how to, I would just go right into the content. And a lot of people would just assume I was a student, And I think it's kind of like gotten away from that now because I look older and I'm going to continue to look older.
That's probably true.
I think I look more like a teacher now than a student. Even though my hairline was more aged in my older videos. But over time, I'm like, all right, as I got to 25, 26, especially 27, I think 27 was the big one where I was like, I am no longer in my mid-20s. This is my late 20s. And the next stage is 30. So do I want to be operating under the name College Info Geek forever? And I think you and I had a conversation, probably. You know what? We had a conversation before episode 200 of this podcast because we were considering ending at 200.
Yeah.
And the justification for that, or the thing that brought it up, was, do we still want to be running the College Info Geek podcast when we are 30? And it's hard no. Like, there wasn't even a thought. Like, no.
No,
absolutely not.
I mean, eventually you keep imagining 5 years in the future. Eventually it stops. So when we should choose, and if you don't choose, you have to let it fizzle out, which is, bowing out is way better.
And this is especially due to the fact that I don't think that college is a necessity for everyone. I am not passionate about FAFSA forms or about college admission rates. I'm not passionate about whether you should go to Harvard or Yale or Stanford or, if a state school is better than a private school. Like, I know things about that. I'll talk about it every once in a while, but I'm much more interested in how do we focus? How do we learn independently? How do we build relationships? How can we deliberately practice more efficiently so I can build my guitar scale skills? Like, I'm much more interested in that kind of stuff. So I don't always want to be operating under this college banner. However, I also don't want to quit College Info Geek. I don't want to leave it in its current state because I think it as an entity has a lot more good that it could do in the world. We have very little content on the site about law school, about grad school, about admissions, about choosing whether or not you should even go, about financial aid. There's a lot that could be done. I would like College Info Geek to be the ultimate resource for people who are thinking about going to college, for people who want to study better in general. Like, I want that to continue to exist. But I can't pour my heart and soul into it forever. So I started making small departures several years ago. The first one was dropping the -- College Info Geek out of the titles of my videos. And I remember there was actually a few people who complained about it. They were like, why'd you drop the dash thing? Which is, it's kind of funny because I feel like YouTube as a whole has moved away from that. But when I started, it was like, Banjo, Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts, -- JonTron. That was like what people in that area of YouTube just did. They would always put like -- their channel name or their name at the end of every title. And I was into watching JonTron and Cat Icarus and all those people. So that's what I did because I tend to emulate a lot of what I like. So I dropped that. And I didn't go to -- Thomas Frank. I just started using titles. I remember being very scared that that was going to tank my views, which of course it hasn't. I also remember being very scared that not having text in my thumbnails was going to tank my views. Turns out I was wrong about that. You know, it's funny, like you get into doing a thing a certain way for long enough and it works for you, and you get to a point where you're very secure in it and you feel like any deviation from the way that you're doing it is going to just destroy your life, which is hilariously wrong in most cases.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of get like the very fact that you've been doing it for a very long time clouds your ability to think rationally about it. Like if I thought about it for 2 seconds, I'm like, what really draws people, like what really draws the eye in an advertisement? It's not the text most times. It's a face or it's some very interesting thing. And it turns out that there's text beneath the thumbnail because there's always a title. So like, do I really need text in the thumbnail? No. You know, and if anything, like people like Matt Diavella or Peter McKinnon are perfect proof that you don't need text in thumbnails. You just need something eye-catching. Anyway, so I dropped that. I eventually dropped the College Info Geek banner off the channel. I used to do a outro thing where it had the logo and it would be like, and the big thing was I used to write a companion article for every video. So here's my flashcards video. Go read the companion article. And I would call that out every time. Go check out the companion article. I stopped doing that too. Now, we still write companion articles a lot of times, but I'll commission them from Ransom or other writers, and we will let them sort of stand on their own and gain views through Google search, but I don't call them out in my videos. And the last bastion of a link between my YouTube channel and College Info Geek was my free book, The 10 Steps to Earning Awesome Grades.
Yeah.
Every video up until probably like the last couple of months ago, I would say, go right here to get my free book on how to earn better grades. So there was always a link to College Info Geek there. I have recently stopped doing that, and I've started pointing out my music channel instead. But it's this very slow, gradual transition away, and I use data to see how it's going. You know, nobody's like, you know, leaving in droves because I'm no longer talking about multiple choice tests. Yeah. So I'm able to talk about things that are more true to what I'm currently interested in, what I think is impactful. I don't have to remain beholden to this past image of myself because I've slowly started transitioning away, doing it strategically.
Yeah, and that's hard enough to deal with anyway, giving up your past self. But this is really a perfect example of just how to do it, because it was 100% education, 10% moving toward other productivity, and then it's like your life of career in this case is a line with a whole bunch of different colors on it, and there's always a gradient intersecting where the two colors split.
Yeah.
So you move toward, now you're at 50% productivity, 50% college. Now you're 90% productivity, and you still got the book call out, and now you're going to put 10% music. You're going to call out the music channel, and every line needs to have a gradient, or else it's jarring, like you said earlier. It doesn't make sense.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You have to have a smooth transition, I think. And if you look at anybody's career trajectory, I think you're going to see these points if you really were to go in and ask them.
Yeah.
You know, like there are a lot of people who used to be actors who are now directors. And if you go into their IMDb, or if you were to ask them if you had the ability, you'd probably hear that, I started transitioning to little directing roles, but still acted. But now, eventually you get to the point where you can just keep doing it. Or there's a guy named Armando. I believe his last name is pronounced Feria. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm bad at pronunciation, but his channel used to be Mondo Bites, and it was all just about like consumer tech. Now his channel is all about filmmaking and camera stuff. But like there was a transition period. You can't just be like, overnight, sorry guys, I don't care about MacBook Pros anymore. I don't care about iPhones. I only care about Red cameras. Because then you're going to alienate people. Yeah,
and you won't have the chance to make the networking that you need, because if we're talking about regular jobs, not like online stuff, you've still got to make the connections. You may have to. Actually, here's a big thing that I think would be hard for people not doing YouTube related things. You might need to. It'd be a good idea to do this anyway. Live below your means.
Oh yeah,
for a while, because even if you're really successful and maybe you make $100,000 a year and you're doing just fine wherever you're living, you're in the Midwest, you're rich there, but then you want to switch to this different career, but it turns out that entire field that you're interested in will never pay you that much in the Midwest. What then? If you're living like at your means, you simply don't have an option. The only way to switch jobs, knowing the peak of the next career is you not paying your bills, that can't work. So you might also, if you're going to be moving into something that won't pay as well or won't pay for a while, start cutting all of those kind of expenses ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Or be willing to accept a reduction in your standard of living.
Yeah, you're gonna don't live in a mansion where you got to pay. Mm-hmm. I mean, tons of celebrities sell their mansions after a while, probably realizing, I have a lot of money, but all the property taxes and the upkeep and the lawn care and this is really kind of dumb.
Mm-hmm. There's a great essay over on Derek Sivers' website. It's about financial independence, and he was talking about how a friend asked him, can you tell me about when you became truly financially free? And Derek Sivers is the guy who founded CD Baby, then sold it for millions of dollars. So this friend's question was really, asking about selling CD Baby and having millions of dollars and being able to do whatever you want. But the story Derek told him was, I eventually saved up enough money that I could be a full-time musician in New York City. And this was before CD Baby. As long as I ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and took the subway every day. But ever since then, I've been financially free. And that was where he ended the story. Because that was his version of financial freedom. I am able to pursue music every day with all of my time. And the way in which I do that is by living with roommates in a cracker box, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and Chef Boyardee.
Yeah.
Making the sacrifices necessary to do this thing I want to do. So I no longer have to sit in a cubicle. A lot of people, they never make the true transition they want to make because they're unable to give up the trappings of their comfortable life.
Yeah, I feel like it's really tricky how that happens. It's almost, if there was some like magical karma force trying to trick people who start to make too much money and let it go to their head and then they spend it all, then you're trapped. You've got like revolving credit card debt or something that you've done, and now you're not free because you let it go to your head once, or didn't think about it, or some sort of catastrophe happened. Mm-hmm. And I think the same thing applies as well to time. I mean, if you're not willing to give up playing video games every evening, or you may have to accept my house, you know what? It's not going to be clean every day. And I just need to accept that deep in my soul, or else I will spend too much time worrying about it and never get to put that time toward the next thing. There's got to be some sort of cut. Yeah. It may be painful to cut whatever that is, but
I think there could also be some mental shifts that you could make. Like, for whatever reason, in this country, in the United States of America, there's a weird stigma against having people clean your house or mow your lawn for you. Like, people think it's bougie. Like, oh, you have somebody clean your house. But like, people who would say that, they go out and like buy a bunch of random crap and spend the exact same amount of money every month.
Yeah.
And I've heard from people who've like gone and lived in other countries, like having somebody clean your house is super common. Having somebody take care of your lawn or garden is super common. It's just a thing, They didn't even think about it. So I'm like, yeah, I paid $200 a month for someone to come clean my house because my time is better put towards this other thing I want to do. And I either have the money or I'm willing to cut back on other things. Like, I'm not going to spend $25 or $50 on having like 15 different streaming services so I can watch whatever I want. Let me put that towards having somebody come clean my house. They have a job now. They get to run their business, and I have time.
So you may have to cut like some of those preconceived notions of how things are supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing.
I think our culture is so weird in that one way. Like, there's a complete blanket acceptance of rampant consumerism, of spending every dollar you have on consumer products. Like, yeah, it's totally cool that you got the brand new iPhone, even though you have you bought the iPhone, the last gen one as well. It's totally cool that you just bought the new Apple TV and a brand new TV. And like, yeah, you spent the exact same amount of money that you'd spend having somebody mow your lawn, but that's totally cool.
Like, you're paying for time is weird. for some reason.
You have someone clean your house? What are you, some kind of like lazy rich person?
Yeah.
It's like the same amount of money.
Paying for things is cool. Paying for time, frowned upon.
Yeah.
Which is just, you need that time, so you better stop frowning upon it.
What a weird culture where we glorify constant work and material acquisition as desirable, but we look at offloading domestic work as, I don't know, as like something like to detest.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not attainable for everybody, but if you
It's
get to
not.
that point, then it's a good idea at some point.
Yeah.
There's a line where it's more strategic to do that.
And of course, there's going to be the subtype people out there who are not okay with either one. You shouldn't be buying consumer goods, and you shouldn't be, you're too lazy.
If you have the time.
People with that view, you're not going to convince them either way. But the one that I have never understood is the people who they don't even give a second thought to buying all the latest new toys. But the moment someone's like, yeah, I pay someone to clean my house, like, are you so lazy that you're not even willing to clean your own house or do your own laundry? That's just laziness talking. I've seen this in the comments before. And you know what? It's not laziness. It is prioritization. If I were a truly lazy person, would I be doing all of this work that I actually care about?
Yeah.
No, I would be actually being lazy. I'd be playing Call of Duty right now instead of putting out a podcast on a schedule with you.
Yeah, sure. It might count as lazy if you're some silver spoon person with like $1 billion in the bank and you just pay everybody to do it so you can sit around. That might be lazy,
If
but
I were
clearly
a
you're
Trustafarian or something.
Yeah, you're working on things though.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, and at some point the amount of time you would put toward that, when you profit more, what if you wanted to give some of that profit to charity? Then you're hurting those charities by cleaning that laundry yourself when you could have been making the money that could help somebody and helping get somebody to have a job. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, this is a big thing. Like, whenever I talk about a concept and I use myself as an example, and my example involves something that is inaccessible to somebody in the audience, my example is the thing that is inaccessible. The principle is not. And a lot of people have an inability to separate those two things. Some people will be like, the example you gave is the principle, therefore the principle is invalid because I can't do it. I can't afford that, therefore what you've talked about in principle is invalid. And that's not true at all. Like, there are other examples, Are you like out with a washboard washing your clothes in the river because you don't want to pay like 25 cents for a laundromat? No.
Well, and
almost
lawn
nobody
mowing's
does that.
Pretty accessible, really. I mean, we were having people mow the lawn way back right after college because if you get the right people, it's cheap. You just pay
$25 every 2 weeks.
There's
and it was
some
a college
teenager
student.
out there or a college student who wants to do it, and it's cheap. And like,
When I was
we
in
couldn't do it.
college, my friends went out to the bars and spent more than that every weekend. They had the money. Now, maybe they weren't paying off their student loans as fast as they could have, but they had the money. And if you have $50 to go out on a Saturday night and blow it at the bars, then you have $30 or $25 to pay a college kid to mow your lawn if you don't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, sure, maybe
just
you
what
can't
you
afford
value,
a full landscape architect crew to come and like
Yeah, I don't want that.
build you a beautiful garden.
I just want some of the
But that's you're gonna have to cut that standard. It's just basically finding any area where you can cut just a little bit of that time at a profit. If you're gonna pay too much for that and it's gonna cost you like 4 hours of work versus an hour of mowing the lawn, sure, maybe that doesn't make sense. But at some point, you got to find wherever you can scrape all that time and then use that time, or at least a decent chunk of it, at least like a half hour or something, to slowly make your way into things.
Yeah. You know what I did last night? I ran scales on my guitar for an hour. You know what I didn't do last night? Dust. And I have no regrets.
Yeah. Well, and everything's going to take so long. Like, I'm just starting to have the faintest glimpses of connections with people who do things I think are cool that I would love to talk to. And I know it's going to take a while, so I got to start now. It's just, and the money thing is big, but everybody should try to live below their means. I think that's just a good idea, so that you're not, at least in America, so that you don't have a medical emergency and find yourself. It took me so long to recover from the surgery for my finger. That was no good.
Yeah, we've talked about financial bases. We have a whole budgeting episode, an investing episode, and we'll try to get those in the show notes. I think those are like, when we're talking about this idea of sacrificing money to gain time, it's always within the greater context of making sure you have a solid financial base.
Yeah.
You know, I would never say, if you want to transition to music, you know, go spend your emergency fund on the guitar you need. Because no, that's ridiculous.
wouldn't make sense.
You need to be able to take a punch if life punches you in the face. That your first priority is gaining the means to recover from a punch from life. But once you can do that, then you can start making sacrifices. Maybe you are sacrificing some of your money that you're making to gain time. Maybe you're sacrificing the other way around, like Derek Sivers did. Maybe you're just like, I'm just gonna like live in a crappy apartment and eat PB&J every day because that's what it takes to get free, you know?
Yeah.
But I think like the general idea here is if you want to transition into something that you're not currently in, one thing you're going to have to do is potentially challenge your preconceived notions of what is like right, of how society may judge you. You may have to live unconventionally. You may have to deal with some people giving you sideways glances like, oh, you
may have to live in a van down by the river.
You maybe have to live down by the river, you know?
That's fine.
If you want to be a motivational speaker.
All the productivity tips, all the financial tips, all of this should just be funneled toward having that little bit of time that you can put towards something else, because that something else you're going to have to start basically on the ground floor unless you lucked into some really good connections. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to do a lot of, I mean, every bit of pixel art and everything I do there, that's all free. I'm not going to ever expect any money for anything like that. Maybe someday I'll be on an actual game dev thing doing something and get paid for it in like years and years from now. But starting on the ground floor is expensive, so you got to save the money and time somehow.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of relationships, last thing I wanted to mention here is something that I've mentioned many times in this podcast. It's the idea of the fan first approach.
Yeah.
I have spent many hours, many days, many weeks hesitating to make first contact with somebody because I feel like I'm not ready. I just need to get one more cool video up my channel before I reach out. Otherwise, they're going to think I'm lame.
I've done that a few times.
But the thing is, like, we've talked about the principles of influence, and one of them is liking. And people like people who they are familiar with. If you want to make a connection with somebody, I think the first way to do it is just to be a fan. Comment on their videos if they're a YouTuber. Share their things. Share their work. Be a fan, you know? And don't be like a stalker fan. You know, like, I want your autograph or something like that, but just be supportive, be a supporter of their work.
Yeah,
and like eventually there may be an opportunity to do something else.
Yeah.
There are countless people who are now dear friends of mine where I just started as like a wide-eyed, you know, deer in the headlights fan of theirs. Steve Cam from Nerd Fitness, Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income, Jenny Blake, all these people. I was looking up to them like gods of the pantheon when I was a student. I didn't think I'd ever have the opportunity to actually talk to them, but I was like, I really like their work, so I'm going to share it. I'm going to comment on stuff. And eventually there are opportunities. I went to Blog World, and Pat recognized me from comments on the blog, from Twitter, you know, just little tiny interactions that weren't really meant to be building towards anything. They were just, I was a fan. I'm going to express the fact that I like your work.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a interaction at a conference, a selfie together. And then years down the line, now we text each other quite often. You know, that's just how these things often happen, especially with the internet. We're all separated by so much distance, and the people that we want to make connections with, they often have a lot of people vying for their attention. So you can't force it unless you have career capital that makes it beneficial to them for you to force it. You know? Yeah. And sometimes you can do that. Hey, I have a big podcast. Would you like to be a guest on it? That's a way where you can sort of use some of your career capital to accelerate things. And it doesn't mean that it's going to turn into a beautiful relationship. It may just be an interview, and that may be it. You know, I interviewed
and you have to be
dozens
okay with
of
that.
people on my podcast on Listen Money Matters. Most of them I don't talk to anymore. Most of them we just had a conversation. It was valuable for the audience, and that was it. But some of them, the most notable example is Matt Giovanisi and Andrew Fiebert. I reached out to them. My initial reaction with them, first thing I ever did was I reached out and asked for them to be on my podcast as guests. And I think the reason I found their podcast is because I was writing an article like the best podcasts, and I really wanted a personal finance one on there. But I personally wasn't a fan of Dave Ramsey, just, you know, not like my style, not very entertaining for me to listen to. So I was looking for something else. I found their podcast. I liked it, put it on my list, reached out, had them on my show. And now I moved to Colorado because Matt lives out here. We go snowboarding all the time. Like Matt is one of my best friends. Andrew is one of my best friends. And that started because of, a professional thing. Now, as a professional thing kind of stemming from, I like your work, I want to talk to you, not, I think that you being on my podcast would be financially advantageous to me.
Well, if you view it like that, there's a hard stop on how far that relationship can go. Mm-hmm. It could be like, okay, sure, that makes business sense.
Now, I think when
Done.
When Obama's Secretary of Education reached out to me way back in the day and wanted to be on my podcast, that was very much we, the government, feel that having Arnie Duncan on your podcast would be a financially
with a cap
advantageous
on,
thing.
holding a skateboard, clearly.
Yeah. How do you
fit
do,
in.
fellow kids? And that was a great conversation. But I
But
do
you
not
weren't
believe
gonna be
Arnie Duncan
friends.
had any intention of becoming friends with me. They wanted to take advantage of my platform and my better connection with students because of my age.
Yeah, which is fine if
That's
you both
fine.
understand that
I don't
to
think
be the
that's
case.
evil or cynical. That's totally fine. But if I want to build relationships with people that are organic and that are built on like friendship and trust, that's not how I'm going to go into my initial interactions with people.
Yeah.
It's going to be fan first.
The relationships you end up building are going to be almost as important, if not as important, as to the work that you end up doing. Because you have to be able to get your foot in there somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
So all of that's a slow burn. I'm really interested in like the line with the gradient thing. Like I think you could do that for most things. Just all of the phases of your life. Like how many different colors of gradient would I write out? I'm not sure.
And you know what? It's not even like I think it's
Or
even
maybe
more,
or maybe circles that overlap over each other.
I think it's even more complicated than just a gradient. Because when I think back to like small projects I've done just for fun, they often apply.
Oh, they'll come back.
They come back around, right?
They'll come back later at some point.
Like I had that video editing job at the Virtual Reality Center in 2012, I think, the summer we all lived together. And they taught me how to edit with Final Cut 7. It was definitely 7 because it had multiple layers, didn't have that magnetic timeline thing. They taught me how to do a 3-point lighting setup for an interview. They taught me how to go around and film B-roll. But I had no intention of doing video at the time. None at all. Hadn't even started the podcast. I was a writer. I was so enamored with the idea of traveling the world like Steve Cam or like Nomadic Matt and being a blogger. And that was all I wanted to do. I did the video thing because it was a summer job and it seemed kind of interesting at the time. But now, or when I got into video in 2014, I was like, hey, I've never really used Premiere Pro anymore, but this kind of seems like Final Cut 7. Like here's the layers, here's the tracks. I cut footage up. Kind of comes back.
Yeah. So I guess when you get that free time and you can invest it in random things, whenever you have an opportunity to do something really cool or unique, you should just take it, basically, because you have no idea when that stuff's going to pay off. So many random skills from our past have connected back to things we do now.
Yeah.
Couldn't have possibly predicted that.
So you know what I think you should do?
What?
You should do a game jam.
Is that like for toast?
It's for toast.
Well,
you could. I mean, there literally is a game where you play as a piece of toast.
Okay.
I think it's called Bread Simulator. I would not be surprised if that was made a game jam.
Yeah,
No, game jam is like a startup weekend. It's usually like a 48-hour event where you show up, you like pair up in teams. You're like, hey, let's make a game, and then you like just do as much as you can in 2 days.
See, that'd be cool.
You know?
That'd be cool. I'm hoping to make like a little arcade style. Like, I don't think I'm going to make a full indie game or anything this year, but I want to make something that's a little, just like an arcade game. Doesn't need a story, doesn't need anything, but you can press buttons and stuff that kind of makes sense happens. Mm-hmm. If I get that done this year, I'm going to feel great about it.
You could make that at a game jam. Did you know that Hollow Knight started as a game jam project? The little character that you play as, he was the character in a game jam project that they did in 2 days. And then later on, they were like, hey, let's grab him and make it in 2 days. Literally the best Metroidvania game ever made.
Yeah, well, see,
Small beginnings.
It's really cool because you have no idea where those things are going to pay off. And I don't know why Celeste started this way. I don't remember the history of it, but Celeste had the Pico 8 game first, basically an arcade game with similar thing. And then it was like, actually, this is a really good idea. Mm-hmm. And then it became...
Well, if you look back into... it's
possibly
Matt
my
Thorson.
favorite indie game of all time.
Yeah. If you look back into Matt Thorson's history, like you go back to their very early games, they're very much like the Pico 8 version of Celeste. Very simple platformers.
Yeah.
But it's all this gradual progression, and you get to Tower Fall, which is amazing, and then you get to Celeste, which is just easily the best thing that they've ever made.
Just want to work on stuff now.
Well, let's recap then. So, for transitioning to something new, you need to be willing to make sacrifices in your free time because you need to dedicate time to the new thing you want to do. You may need to make sacrifices in the lifestyle you're living in order to save money. And the faster you want to make the transition, the more sacrifices you're going to have to make. You may need to challenge your preconceived notions of what is like okay in terms of, and the example here was like, paying someone to clean your house to gain time. That's fine.
Yeah, and I think another one, if you could save up a little extra for, would be if there's an event, like a cool event where you might meet people, like a convention or anything like that, saving up to travel and go to something like that if possible.
Yeah,
that might take longer to save up for, but
it's very worth it though. And that's a great way to get exposure and to be able to talk with people who are in the new industry you want to be in.
Yeah.
If I really, really, really wanted to transition to music faster, I would be going to more shows.
Yeah, it speeds up the networking at a cost. So if you can cut your standard of living a little bit, so you can save up for those, that could be an accelerator.
With building relationships, fan first is great, but also find ways to utilize your current standing, whether it's having the money to travel to conferences or having a platform and using that to interview people. And it could be the smallest of platforms. Hey, I write for the school paper. Go watch Catch Me If You Can. That's how he interviews the people who run Pan Am to figure out what their badges look like. He poses as a school reporter, and they're more than happy to tell him everything he wants to know.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have a big old blog or anything. You could just be like, hey, I write for the school paper.
Yeah.
But, find ways to build relationships, to get information, and find ways to like get mini apprenticeships. Whether it's going to a game jam and being on a team with somebody who might have a bit more experience than you, or this is a big one. When our friend Carly wanted to open a coffee shop, the first thing I was like, well, you should probably go get a job at a coffee shop and try to work your way up to a manager so you can be in it and see all the things that goes into running a coffee shop without having to save up many thousands of dollars or take out a loan to get a building. Like you would probably want to get some experience in the running of that business before you plunge in feet first. That's, again, gaining career capital. And the big thing, try to find ways where your current thing intersects with the thing you want to transition into and find ways to strategically use those. Yeah. In my case, using my study playlist as a way to start building a little bit of a base for my own music.
Yeah, whatever way you can find to like maximize the value of your current resources to make them useful. Maybe there aren't a lot of overlaps, but I bet if you're creative, a lot of things will have some overlap.
Yeah. So I have a question for the audience, and I'm going to say put your answers in the YouTube version of this because I think our YouTube comment section is actually the best area of discussion for a podcast.
Podcasts are otherwise pretty hard to.
There's not. Yeah, I mean, you could always send it on Twitter, but I think the YouTube comments for this episode are probably going to be the best place to spur real discussion. But I'm curious, like, do you have an example that comes to mind of somebody who has made a very successful transition from one area to something else that was completely different? I would be curious to know. And if you know how they did it, even better. It doesn't have to be somebody famous. Could be your dad or your mom or anybody. But I'd be curious to know.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is episode 287. So if you want to get the show notes for this episode, you can go over to cigpodcast.com/287 or just go to cigpodcast.com to figure out how to subscribe. We are on Spotify. We are on Google Podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Pocket Casts. We're on Overcast. Something else with casts in it, probably.
Probably.
I don't know anything else.
I don't know.
Not Addicting Podcast. Podcast Addict. I think that's an app.
That sounds familiar.
It's like a free Android app. But I think Android now just has Google Podcasts. So just use that. Oh, Stitcher. Stitcher's one. And we're on YouTube. And all those are accessible, once again, via cigpodcast.com. You can also go over to collegeinfogeek.com to see lots of other cool tips and articles about how to be a better student, or go over to youtube.com/ThomasFrank to check out my regular videos, or go to thomas.lol to check out what I'm doing with music. Might as well use this platform to maybe get one or two more listeners.
Yeah.
I currently have 2 tracks out now. They are study music tracks, but I have a third one in the works, and I'm very excited to release it. I'm going to try to do like a bigger release for this one. And I have some other strategies up my sleeve for enabling that transition to be more organic and successful. If you enjoy this podcast, you can always give us a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts, because we do have a rating and review area there. And that's it. Maybe share it with a friend. Maybe leave your phone out in the middle of a park playing our episodes so everyone around can realize how dope they are. And then they'll be like, what is that?
Naturally.
How do I subscribe to that? Is that a podcast? What's a podcast? And you can educate them.
Yep.
And that would be awesome. But as always, thank you so much for just hanging out with us, and we will see you in the next episode. Stay cute.